There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Hey, a movie, yeah, we're gonna be a movie,
Starring everybody
and me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Hey, a movie, we can watch it all develop, starring everybody
and me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello, welcome to another edition of the 4-on-1 Summer Blockbusters series. I am your host, the mandated reporter on Frankly I'm Mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. Joining me as always is my buddy from the 4-on-1 Ground and Pound radio show, the roving reporter on the scene, and the 4-on-1 jack of all trades, Mr. Jeff Harris, straight out of Comic-Con. How you doing, sir?
Snick, bub. This is Wolverine, and I'm the best there is at what I do. And we're here to talk about my brand new hit movie, The Wolverine, aptly titled. When I say snick, that's the onomatopoeic sound from when I flash my claws out of my hand, my adamantium claws, which are adamantium no more. But that was a spoiler warning, because that was a spoiler. We're going to be having lots of spoilers here. So, let's get to it. Snicked, bub.
My, what an impressionist you are, Mr. Harris. As he indicated, we are going to talk about the Wolverine tonight. We both saw it, both have a lot to talk about, so we don't want to waste any time. We're going to get right into it, and when we're ready to wrap up that discussion, just stick around for a little bit longer because we are going to talk about Jeff's adventures in Comic-Con. So a little extra for you from the podcast. All right, so the Wolverine takes place after the events of X-Men: The Last Stand, and it follows sort of the further adventures of Logan after his whole world came crashing down, it would seem. And story takes place in Japan, where he gets sort of roped into dealing with this Japanese family and his reemergence in the world. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Now, you and I were talking before the broadcast, Mr. Harris, and one of the complaints about this movie, we're going to get right to the point of things, no pun intended, was that Wolverine was too emo. When you meet him, he's drinking in the woods. He's kind of a caveman mess. He's just wallowing in a lot of self-pity. And what people complained about is not enough Wolverine slicing and dicing and too much of him pining over Jean Grey. Now, someone actually had the temerity to say, "Oh, just get over it. Just get over Jean Grey." Need I remind people he was instrumental in her death, and that was the woman he loved. This is after decades and decades of being in wars and watching everybody around him die like a goddamn vampire. It frustrated the hell out of me, but let me let you speak to that, because I thought that added a lot of dimensions to the movie and the character, that I felt like that was a realistic presentation of what a character who'd been through what he's been through would act like. He's not just going to go, well, Jean Grey's dead and everybody I've known and loved is dead around me, but that's quite all right. Where's the nearest supervillain I can chop in half? No, but that's not realistic, wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, look, the third movie, as bad as the third X-Men movie was, it kind of ended, Logan was kind of at peace with himself, and he kind of accepted his place at the school for gifted youngsters even after Xavier died. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what happened that brought him to this sort of gnarled state we see him in at the beginning of the movie. I also kind of wonder what happened a little bit, that it seems he can remember things from World War II now, when beforehand he couldn't remember anything like from before 15 years earlier, blah, blah, blah. I have a million nitpicks I can probably talk about with this movie, but, I'm not going to dwell on them. Wolverine has always been this kind of brooding, dark kind of loner. He's this kind of Ronin. He's this kind of wandering Ronin samurai looking for redemption. He hates himself. He generally always hates himself. And hates the things that he does, but he also has to make, he's the one who's willing to make the sacrifices that the other heroes won't. He's always willing to go to those dark places the other heroes, are not willing to go to. But when they need to go there, they usually call Wolverine, and they don't really ostracize him for it, just because they need, at the end of the day, that's the guy you want on your side. But Wolverine has always kind of been this kind of dark, well, maybe not always, but the best stories are kind of these dark, sort of introspective stories. This movie was heavily based on the Wolverine miniseries by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller, which is not only my favorite Wolverine story, period, it's one of my favorite comic stories, period, and it kind of just speaks to my affinity for Wolverine as a character. It's really the quintessential Wolverine story. Now, of course, this movie is not like a panel-for-panel adaptation, as it were. It's very different. But I did like sort of the idea of taking that sort of basic storyline and using it as a skeleton of this movie.
I think as comic book fans, we tend to get very caught up in literal translations and lack thereof, and that leading to criticism and frustration of these kinds of movies. I think, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all comic book fans here, you need to let that go. Hollywood is never.
To be fair, sometimes you can see these like really unique cinematic experiences. Look at 300. Look at Sin City. Those were more literal and more faithful to the graphic novels of which they were based than pretty much anything we've ever seen before. And they were very successful, and they were very good, and they
were also the exception
translated
to the rule.
not just the story, but also the actual look and the imagery that those comics brought to the table.
Yes, they were also artfully done, and that because they were using that comic book style, it lended itself to doing a more literal translation. But 9 out of 10 times, the studio and the people involved in making the movie, as I've said many times before on The Long Road to Ruin and on this podcast, people want to put their own stink on these things. They use the source material as sort of a starting point, but ultimately they're in the business of making movies, not real life action comic books. So I think we all kind of just need to get over that and start appreciating the movie for what it is, and stop criticizing it for for not being what we wanted it to be. And having said that, this was a movie about a guy who's struggling with his sense of self and the tragedies that he's experienced in recent years, and really over the length of his time. I mean, not to go too far off on a tangent here, but this is a theme that we've seen in other movies. People who are cursed with immortality. And that was one of the themes I really liked about this, was him struggling with that. And as we see in movies that deal in this thing, it tends to make people want to withdraw and not be around other people anymore, because ultimately they'll watch them die. And after a while, the human psyche just doesn't want to deal with that much pain. So for me, it was interesting to see him sort of forced out of his isolation and then brought into this world where he returns to Japan, which is where the movie begins with him in World War II. He's at the Nagasaki site where they dropped the atom bomb. So for me, that was fun.
What I did like about that scene was how Wolverine's like he's the only one that understands what's coming, and he's like, I'm just going to chill out here and just wait it out, which I thought was hilarious.
And when you think about it, he's a prisoner of war at that point, and even as a prisoner of war, he's looking around him and he elects to save one of his captors. There's a great deal of humanity in the Wolverine character as presented in this film that I think gets overlooked.
And Wolverine has always been that way. He's like a samurai. He's a man of honor, but at the same time, he's looking out there, and he recognizes that this character Yoshida, he was actually trying to free the prisoners, and he tried to spare Logan's life. So Logan was, I just saw that as him more repaying the favor, and that's just kind of how Logan is, even with his enemies at certain points.
It certainly makes him a sympathetic hero. You don't necessarily want to see a hero who just allows, right at the beginning of the movie, allow everyone around him to die when there's a chance to save one of them. You want to see the hero. Who said it recently? Oh, it was Pat who said it yesterday, as a matter of fact, on the MMA show, which I thought was a great line. The hero is the one that's willing to take on any task and go through what nobody else will. That's what separates him from the coward. And that's one of the great things that sets up this movie and why, despite the fact that he's so low at the beginning, you're still rooting for Wolverine. And that is a concept in a lot of movies that I think gets lost. I say it a lot on The Long Road to Ruin. You need heroes to root for. Without a hero to root for, you're kind of watching a rudderless ship. And one too many times they create these anti-hero characters or a hero, for lack of a better word, who you don't want to root for. They're just kind of scumbags. So it was nice to see a traditional hero embodied in the Wolverine character. Let's talk a little bit about, before I move forward, I want to say again, people complained a lot about the flashes with him and Jean Grey. And I would defy any one of you to have met the love of your life only to have lost her the way he had and not have flashbacks.
I'm going to explain this. The reason I think people have trouble with this is because in the X-Men movies, they kind of made Wolverine the star, and they kind of shoved aside Cyclops, who's a favorite among many X-Men and comic fans. Cyclops has always sort of been the leader and the go-to leader in the X-Men comics, and it's always, and the focus was on him and Jean Grey. Wolverine was the bad boy that Jean Grey, she flirts with but never gets with. She and Scott loved each other, and I think fans feel slighted that they kind of made it more about Wolverine and Jean Grey. Jean Grey is not Wolverine's the love of his life. I'm sorry, she's not.
In the comic books.
The person that fit. There are two people that possibly might fit that. One would be Rose, which is arguable, but really I would say Mariko is really the true love of his life. Just because of their long-standing history, they almost got married, and just that relationship, the way it worked. With Jean, it was an unrequited love. She turns, even in the second movie, she turns him down. So to call her the love of his life, I go with it in the movie, but it's just I can't really accept it because that's not, to me. Jean Grey kind of just exemplifies, the ideal woman for Logan, but she's a fantasy. She's a fantasy figure. She's not real. And then she becomes the Phoenix, and she's like myth itself. The true love of his life, I would say, is Mariko, but that's just a hardcore comic fan's perspective.
Right.
There.
And as I have to remind people, you're watching a film, not a comic book. I know that's difficult.
It's a film, but he's devastated over Jean Grey. Yeah, I get it, but the love of his life, no, I can't accept that.
If you're saying this doesn't really match up with the previous film, I think that's a fair criticism, and I'm willing to accept that. If you're going to sit there, and I'm not saying you, Jeff Harris, but in general, if people are going to sit there and argue over and over and over again that that's not how it happened in the comic books, I would suggest you go outside and get some air. It's
look,
film is film.
I don't let that get in the way of me enjoying this movie or having, because it's a cool movie, and we're getting to see Wolverine, one of the all-time great Wolverine stories adapted to the screen, and we're seeing Hugh Jackman at his brooding best. So it's all good to me. It's all good in the hood.
And speaking of all good, let's moving away from some of those things. I want to take a look at the landscapes and the setting. I don't think anyone's complained about this, or if they have, it's not something that I've seen. I absolutely loved the fact that they took Wolverine out of America and out of, sort of the traditional landscapes they've had him in, and they put him in this new world, really embedded him in Japan. And I know they did because I had my wife the whole time who lived in Japan for 2 years sitting next to me pointing out landmarks to me as if we were on some sort of a tour. So, and as somebody who could authenticate that experience for me, they really brought it to life, and I enjoyed watching him sort of navigate that setting. Jeff, what did you think of the movie taking place in Japan and what you saw in the landscapes and the setting and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, since the Wolverine miniseries graphic novel, that whole story is set in Japan. Wolverine going to Japan, it's like this is seminal, Wolverine storytelling. Japan is a place Wolverine has a deep, personal and emotional connection to. Usually the best Wolverine stories revolve around him, going to Japan or doing something in Japan, especially this story from which the movie took a lot of its cues from. Now, most of the movie was shot in Japan. Part of it was they used New South Wales and Sydney, Australia, to double as Japan in the movie, like for the Nagasaki scene, for that scene. And the movie actually had a very long trouble production. First of all, like Gavin Hood, he did X-Men Origins Wolverine. It did financially well, but it was kind of seen as sort of a bust among moviegoers. It was very negative reviews. Fans didn't like it, and that stigma probably followed over to this movie as well, because it opened pretty low. It opened less than $55 million this weekend. But the best Wolverine stories involve Japan. I love Japan is you don't see many Hollywood movies set in Japan for starters. So I love just the setting of Tokyo and seeing Wolverine interact in this environment. I only just wish we would have gotten sort of here's what I love about the Wolverine stories in Japan so much. When he's in Japan, he's totally in his element. He speaks Japanese. He's sort of more sympathetic to Japanese traditions and hierarchy and also in just customs. And he always ingratiates himself into like his environment. We didn't really get that here. He was kind of like a stranger in a strange land in this movie. So we don't really get to see him just sort of like integrate, which is one of the big things I like about those Wolverine stories in Japan, that he's kind of in his element and like, this is his territory. But whatever. For the sake of the story, Wolverine, the only other time he was in Japan was probably when he was a prisoner of war in Nagasaki, and that's it. And his memories are probably hazy on that anyway, so who knows? In short.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the action sequences. The movie is, I think, very front-loaded with a lot of great action sequences, one of which, I'll tell you what, I just recently watched the first Mission Impossible. You and I talked about the Lone Ranger. I'm seeing a lot of, action sequences involving trains lately. That seems to be the big theme in my life. Absolutely loved the way they did this particular train sequence. And again, I just saw them do this in Mission Impossible. Of course, that was 1996. It's always fun.
Spider-Man 2, 2004.
Yeah. It's always fun to see Hugh Jackman's Wolverine being able to let loose and be the Wolverine you see in the comic books.
I thought they had like a freight train sequence.
Yeah, apparently this is the big thing in Hollywood. It was I absolutely love that sequence. I thought some of it was considering they've done this sort of thing before. I thought it was a nice play on the idea. I thought it was a nice use of the train. I absolutely love the bit where he finally he's trying to go backwards and he basically becomes a giant sharp missile and goes at the guy. I had a good laugh out loud moment when he fakes the one guy out and as they're trying to jump over the low bars, and he fakes the one guy out and the guy jumps and he comes back down and bam, hits him right in the face.
I like
good stuff there.
That that his wounds aren't healing. So while he's able to keep going when he gets shot or when he gets slashed, but he feels all of it and he has to deal with it. Like he can't just walk it off. It's still like he has to fight through it, and it's still there throughout the whole sequence. So he's shot to hell. He's getting hurt.
Well, he's vulnerable.
Like,
we don't get to see.
Very vulnerable.
We don't get to
a
see
lot
him
more
very.
vulnerable in this movie, and that did make it more exciting.
Yeah, we don't get to see Wolverine be vulnerable very much, and a lot of times we don't get to see any hero get to be this vulnerable. So it was actually fun. The other nice thing I like about it is it goes back to the immortality thing. This curse that he carries around with him. He partially loses it for about half the film, and you start to see him wanting it back. Realizing that he needs his healing factor. So the immortality is a curse. It is also a blessing. It's all about how you live your life, such as it is. And I loved that idea. It also wasn't beat to death. It was there. You had to kind of be looking for it. But I love the fact that it was there. And as far as giving him an internal obstacle to deal with among, his nightmares and apparently his post-traumatic stress disorder, was the fact that early on in the movie his healing factor was damaged. So that was great. I loved all of that.
Mangold is a very interesting director because he does something like Copland, and then he does like in Girl Interrupted, heavy dramas, and then he does something like then he does a chick flick like Kate and Leopold, another movie starring Hugh Jackman there, early post X-Men career, and then he does Walk the Line. He does 3:10 to Yuma. So it's weird to me how he does all sorts of, like, you look at his filmography as a very sort of eclectic mix of projects. Like, so it's interesting. This movie, the way he shot this movie, I mean, it looked really good. It was a dark, violent movie. I liked that. I mean, this was a pretty bloody movie. I'm surprised how much they got away with, even for a PG-13 rating. Like that scene where Logan's operating on himself and has to remove this bug from his heart. That kind of reminded me of the operating scene in Prometheus. It's kind of a very similar sequence. He has to rip out this parasite from his heart with his own metal cloth.
Yeah, but let's not make people seem like it was Friday the 13th, Jeff. All of the scenes of violence.
This was a pretty bloody, violent movie for PG-13.
Well, no. I would say that it was violent. I would not call it bloody. You don't see any blood in almost any of the fight scenes. And then when he's operating on himself...
No, you do see blood. There are...
Very little. This isn't Kill Bill here. I feel like we're quibbling over a detail here, but
now here's my criticism on Mangold's directing. There are times where the action and like in the sword fighting in particular looked, I don't know, everything just looked very tight and close together, and it looked a little awkward. Like specifically. With when Yukio was fighting, when that it just looked odd to me. It didn't. It looked weird that everything was staged so close and tight. I think Mangold. There were times where Mangold needed to just kind of pull the camera back and like just make the action a little grander. It was just odd. Sometimes it just didn't look very good to me.
One of the things that I think, and this might be an item of criticism for some, but for me it was a positive, was that if you don't know that Wolverine is a comic book character and you just walked in blind and thought you were going to just see an action movie, and this goes to what you were saying before, you really could just enjoy it as an action movie with people in it, people with emotions and depth. That was one of the things that I liked about it, and I would have agreed with you. And what drove me crazy about some of the criticism is that instead of sort of enjoying this story about this guy and what he's going through, and all of these characters around him, and then also enjoying the action that's being presented, which I thought was fun to watch. Everyone just goes, the Silver Samurai. Why does it have to be like Iron Man? And it just goes on and on and on. It was like, come on, for a moment, forget for a moment he's an X-Man, and just and appreciate it like you would say Die Hard.
Okay, the Silver Samurai thing kind of makes it hard. Like, I understand what they're doing there, but it was just way too big and over the top for me. For starters, in the comics, Harada is the one who is the Silver Samurai, the would-be the ninja and the would-be suitor to Mariko. They're actually half siblings in the comics. Harada was the illegitimate son of Shingen Yoshida. The villain in this story in the comics was actually Shingen Yoshida, Mariko's father, played by Hiroyuki Sanada in the movie. It was not this sort of the patriarchal grandfather Yoshida, who turns out to be the Silver Samurai at the end. I think I would have loved if it was just Wolverine kind of fights his way through that village. He finally gets to the palace. He kind of has his game of death. He kind of has his game of death gauntlet, and then he finally gets to Yoshida. What I love in the comic story that they didn't really do here, in the comic story, Wolverine fights Shingen Yoshida for the first time. And this guy who's not a mutant, he's completely 100% human. He's an older guy. He has no special powers. All he has is just sort of, great wisdom and training. And he he beats Wolverine like a redheaded stepchild. Like, Wolverine is humiliated and beaten like a pussy in this fight. It sends him off with his tail between his legs. Like, we've never seen Wolverine humiliated and just beaten up this badly. And he's beaten by a regular dude. And then Wolverine kind of just goes on this big journey where he sort of goes on this journey of redemption where he has to save Mariko and he has to sort of get back at Yoshida, and they have a rematch, and he actually learns from the first fight, and he kind of goes on this humbling sort of samurai journey, and he defeats Yoshida, and he gets the girl. So kind of similar outcomes, but I got to be honest, having the whole big Silver Samurai Iron Man thing in there, I think was a little over the top. Didn't really work very well for me. I would have been fine with Silver Samurai if it was actually Silver Samurai, if Harada was a mutant and they made him Silver Samurai, or they made Shingen Yoshida the Silver Samurai and had him be a mutant or something like that. I would have been fine with that. Like, they would have had the first fight at the beginning and then another fight at the end where Wolverine kind of, he comes full circle, he redeems himself, and he conquers Yoshida.
It felt a little shoehorned in, I'll give you that, but it didn't. Considering the plot of this thing was the Fountain of Youth, essentially, you had Yoshida wanted his mutant healing factor so that he would be immortal and live forever.
Okay, now about that, I would say what happened to Yoshida? He's this. What was the turning point for him that made him this monster? Because he was in Japan. He did something unselfish and kind and honorable. He was actually willing to free the POWs and give them a chance, even though they were probably sitting ducks with the bomb getting dropped. He tried to help the prisoners and tried to let them free. He didn't want to commit seppuku. So I'm just.
Are you really asking what would drive a man to want to live forever?
The desperation what is it? The desperation of survival, whatever it is. I needed
the desperation of survival.
Really understand
it's not that complicated. The man wants to live forever. He's already a powerful mogul. He's on his deathbed, I defy you to find most people who are who with that level of power and notoriety, who are on their deathbed, who wouldn't want an opportunity to live forever. I get what you're saying is like this might have been a bit drastic of a change in his character, but I would tell you that you don't know what happened in the interim years that made him go to that extreme. But
I'm just saying I wanted to understand that more.
Okay. I would tell you that if they had spent time on his backstory to kind of get him to that point, people would have complained not enough Wolverine.
No, I know you can't. I mean, this is already a 2-hour, 15-minute movie, and you can't spend that much time on this guy's backstory. But again, that's just kind of why I kind of prefer the simplicity of the graphic novel and just how it was kind of like, Shingen Yoshida, this douchebag, and he kind of schools Wolverine. Wolverine's humiliating, and he kind of has to rebuild himself from the ground up. And in doing so, he becomes a better samurai, and he redeems himself in the eyes of Mariko, and he redeems himself in the eyes of himself as well. After Shingen beats him like a redheaded stepchild, like a government mule.
I want to talk a little bit about the end of the movie because I really do. I was, before we started, I rated it on Rotten Tomatoes. I gave it 3.5 stars, and why not 4 stars? Well, because out of 5.
That's a 4-star movie to me. 3.5, no. I think, is a fair rating.
Yeah. First of all, that I loved almost every minute of this movie until we got to the final act, the sequence where he goes to save her and he confronts the Silver Samurai and all that. There's a bunch of things going on in that whole sequence that felt very muddled to me. The pacing was a bit odd. First of all, you've now gotten him to the point where he's finally got the bug out of his system. His healing factor's back. He's way motivated to get this girl back. This is where we should have seen Wolverine become, super action hero guy and go do amazing things and then be confronted with the monster villain. Instead, he gets shot in the back with a bunch of arrows, which was my first
including
moment.
Including the toxic arrow. So what? Does he have the infection and what's going on here? Yeah,
why are we retracing our same steps here? But then the part that really threw me. Look, I've been arguing this entire podcast that one should not get too caught up in the source material in the comic book. But there are some things that I think are sacred and should be left alone, like his fucking claws. Wolverine and his claws are one and the same. That is Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer and Hulk's green skin. You can't have Wolverine without them. And in minutes, they cut the claws off. Now, I understand kind of why.
Mark, this was a big thing. This was a big thing in the early 1990s. Now, here's what happened. Now, this is like me dropping the comic knowledge on you. It might be a little dense and boring, so just bear with me with me for a little bit. In the 1990s, there was a storyline where the X-Men have a giant battle with Magneto. Magneto, being the master of magnetism, he's able to control all the adamantium in Wolverine's body, right? So what does he do?
He
literally
rips it out of his body, right?
Every single bit of adamantium off of Wolverine's skeleton and just tosses it away. The whole incident almost kills Wolverine. And Wolverine pops his claws, and he has bone claws. So that's where this is the storyline where we learn essentially that Wolverine was born with his claws, or maybe not born with them, they were a mutation. The bone claws are essentially a part of his mutant mutation or whatever. Now, going by some storylines, he's not even a mutant, but those are stupid stories, so don't even pay attention to those. So he loses his metal claws. He doesn't have his metal claws, and it's like this for about 6 years in the comics. And a lot of fans hated these stories. We kind of hated seeing Wolverine with the bone claws because they look stupid. The metal claws look cooler. It's part of his iconic look. But this is just an example of how comics and stories go through these phases where things wildly change from the status quo from time to time. Now going to Captain America. there was a period where Captain America actually loses his shield. His shield gets shattered, and he goes doing other shields for a while. Like one time he uses his shield made out of like solid pure energy. Another time he uses like a replica of his like triangular like riot shield that he used a little bit in the first Avenger. So it's just kind of an example. They're kind of So they kind of did their ode to that here with him getting his claws chopped off, and then he grows in the bone one. He's able to grow in the bone one.
My wife actually asked me that.
Are always weak, but he can grow them back.
Right. It's funny. My wife actually asked me about that before we saw the end credit scene. She was like, "So is that it? He doesn't have claws anymore?" I'm like, "No, they'll grow back. that's they can't have Wolverine without any claws at all." I get what you're saying, and I do remember Magneto ripping off his adamantium and all of that. I didn't realize that it was.
Now I'm not saying I like it. I agree with you. I hated those years. I hated those storylines where like, what is he doing? Why is he walking around with these crappy bone claws? They look like garbage. Give him his metal back. Like that's like we were all begging for him to get his metal back, and then it took freaking him getting kidnapped by Apocalypse. Apocalypse had to kidnap him and make him one of his 4 horsemen to get his adamantium back. It was hilarious.
Right, which they're not going to do. Which they're not going to do in the movies, more than likely. I don't think we're ever going to see an Apocalypse storyline or anything, or Inferno or anything like that. But it was a jarring. Let me tell you this, just from a moviegoer's point of view, it was jarring to see. It was an interesting sequence, but still, it was jarring to see just because we had already seen him suffer so much through this movie with the loss of his partial loss of his healing factor and all of that. So like, oh, again, more of this, and then and it's not like an easy thing to recreate. It isn't like you can see him at the end of the movie and he's being confronted by something of up come metal claws again. They do that. They do that.
It's supposed to be indestructible.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Strongest metal on Earth.
Yeah, I didn't like it. It was just one of those things where I was just like, ugh, I don't like this end sequence at all. It was all over the place. Just to kind of wrap things up, talk a little bit about some of the other characters, and then I want to hear about your Comic-Con experience. I loved his sidekick in this movie, who becomes, who at the end she's like, I'm your bodyguard. I thought that every time she said it, I thought that was hilarious, and I enjoyed the character. I enjoyed the actor who played the character, the actress. Like America, I enjoyed the actress who played the love interest. I don't have a tremendous amount of.
It was Rilo Fukushima as Yukio, and it was Teo Okamoto as Mirako.
Yep, thought they were great. So I thought everyone's performance was spot on, and it made me interested in their characters. Really enjoyed them. The one character who threw me was Viper. The actress who plays her drove me nuts. And I know you and I were talking about this. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that now. But I don't remember anything about the Viper character from the comic books, and I don't care. I just know that Hollywood studios have this tendency to the biggest offender of this is the old Batman movies. But like every character who calls himself an animal has to be an actual animal, like the Penguin. It just drove me nuts.
Exactly. In the comics, Lady Viper was she was a ranking member of Hydra, the sort of evil Nazi spy organization from Captain America: The First Avenger. She's been sort of like a high-ranking criminal and sort of like the Marvel Universe criminal underworld. She gets involved in Madripoor, which is sort of like a fictional, South Pacific Asian country that Wolverine visits a lot. There was actually a story where Viper and Wolverine actually get married, which was funny. They get married in order to honor some sort of stupid promise to a mutual friend. That made no sense. So Viper and Wolverine do have a long-standing history, but it's kind of ridiculous. She never had, she was never a snake toxic lady. In this movie, I don't know how they came up well, I don't know. Writer's sitting in a room. Okay, her name's Madam Viper. Let's make her a Viper. Let's actually make her a mutant Viper. She messes around with toxins, whatever. No disrespect to the actress. I think her name is Svetlana Kodachenko. She had a small role in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy in that movie as Tom Hardy's love interest. This movie, her accent was all over the place. I don't know if she was ever dubbed over, but she didn't really quite have it down. You see, the thing is, in the comics, Viper, she's like Eastern European. So, I think they should have just stuck with that instead of try and make her American or whatever. It didn't really work. Her whole point in the story, do you have any idea what she was saying to Wolverine at the end? Because I could not make heads or tails out of what she was saying.
I don't know.
She's saying, I'm immune to the toxin known as man. Okay, what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't be killed. I too am a vampire and cannot be killed. I don't know. Maybe she was the oh shit, what are their names? The ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings. No man can kill her. Which would have been great if they had a woman stab her in the Achilles heel. That'd be fantastic. Right out of the Lord of the Rings. I don't know.
And here's the other thing. Yukio. Now Yukio. They kind of made her Wolverine's kind of like spunky kid sidekick. In the comic, she's actually Wolverine's like hot, sexy girlfriend. What happens is after Shingen
sorry, go ahead.
After Shingen whips Wolverine like a government mule, he kind of wallows in all of his self-pity, and he gets picked up by Yukio, who's kind of like this hit woman assassin for hire. And she's still around today, and she always has this kind of on-again, off-again fling with Wolverine, and she also kind of takes care of Wolverine's adopted daughter, Amiko. So there's always this weird thing with Yukio where they're kind of like friends with benefits now, basically, and they've kind of been that way for quite some time.
Yeah, I'll be curious if you see her in Days of Future Past, if they bring her up again, or if she's just somewhere forgotten about.
I doubt it because, going by the end, the stinger sequence in this movie, it's 2 years later and Wolverine's back on his own again.
Yeah, well, I mean that was certainly what was implied, but that doesn't mean you don't know. Neither one of us know if she's going to be in the movie or not.
She was an interesting performer. She's not like classically sexy, but there's something alluring about her. But she looks like weird. She doesn't look.
I just watched the movie Pitch Perfect with my wife, and she reminds me of the Asian character. I forget her name. She reminds me of the Asian character in that, where she had a very odd but interesting look to her.
She looks like she could be a mutant, but I'm not trying to be mean here. She doesn't. She looks like almost like an Inhuman anime character. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
gosh.
I'm saying that's what I found appealing about her. She looks something looked like odd about her, oddly appealing.
Hannah May Lee is Lily, something Japanese, a strange member of the Bellows who speaks too quietly to be heard. Yeah, she had a look like this Hannah May Lee character. Could have been the same actress. Who the hell knows? But all right.
She reminds me a lot of Devin Aoki, actually, who kind of played similar roles 10 years ago.
Real quick, and then we'll transition out of this. The final scene that's in the middle of the end credits. I don't know if there was any more to it at the very end of the end of the credits, but somewhere in the middle of the credits, they go to Wolverine, and Magneto has got his powers back, which is what you saw in the last scene of The Last Stand. He's working on getting his powers back. Professor Xavier shows up, stops time again, and they tell him dark forces are amassing. And
he doesn't stop time. He stops everyone else.
Yeah.
He's not that powerful.
Yeah, whatever. Such an odd point to quibble about. In any case, they tell him, look, we need
Mark.
you. Shut up. The dark forces are amassing, and they're alluding to the next movie, which is Days of Future Past, which is going to combine some of the cast members from the previous X-Men movies with the cast members from First Class, and they're going to do the actual dates to the best that they can do it. The Days of Future Past storyline, where I guess they're going to, from what I've read, they're going to link it to the Kennedy assassination, which is what gets the ball rolling for the Sentinels to be created, and the Sentinels are, as you know, take over the world. I'm looking forward to it. What are some of your thoughts about Days of Future Past? Did that get you excited for it, or are you cautiously optimistic
about it? I'm very cautious about it because, well, I like the idea that Bryan Singer is coming back. I don't know how they're going to feasibly combine these two casts. I know Wolverine is they're going to have Wolverine be the hero who kind of goes back in time to fix it, to fix everything. But I mean, how's that going to work? What are we going to be left with ultimately? Is it the cast from the first two X-Men movie? Is Wolverine is he going to erase himself in basically the first two X-Men movies that I actually really like, or is he just going to erase X-Men 3 out of existence? I'm kind of concerned about all that. How are they going to? Where do all the
Terminator movies have taught us not to be, worried about time travel gobbledygook, as did Star Trek.
I mean, that's kind of my issue. It's we're dealing with time travel, and I'm kind of concerned about that. And I'm concerned about the size of the cast and how I think I like that. It sounds like they're bringing everyone back, but I don't want to see them get shortchanged. I want to see them have time on screen and get to do cool stuff, because I feel like in the last X-Men movie, not First Class, but in X-Men 3, I feel like we were robbed of all the real cool money stuff we were really waiting to see, stuff that just didn't happen. Like Colossus, for example. You have Colossus, he goes with the X-Men to the final battle, and we never even see him there. It was what the hell happened? Anna Paquin, Rogue, the perfect mutant to stop Jean Grey, decides to go get a cure that's not even permanent. That was a slap in the face to the character and was racist and sexist as well. I could not accept what they did to Anna Paquin as Rogue in the third movie. So, again, I just don't know how it's going to work. I want to see the Sentinels. I'm very excited that they're going in that direction of seeing the Sentinels, but how it's going to pan out, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think I've already trained myself to not get too excited or hopeful about movies of this type. I just, my only hope is that the story isn't so convoluted. I start banging my head on the wall, and I'm entertained.
I'm going to tell you right now, Mark. The whole Avengers thing changed the whole direction of this franchise, because now I'm glad this movie was a sequel. It was actually a sequel. It was not a prequel, because I hate prequels. I say no looking back. I'm glad this wasn't mired in the whole prequel stigma. But, they had that bumper at the end, and I think the reason they're going in this direction is because of Avengers. They're trying to do a connective tissue X-Men universe here now, kind of like what Marvel's done with their films. And I think the way Marvel Disney did their films had a huge impact on how they did Wolverine 2 and the next X-Men film.
Well, that does take us into your experience with Comic-Con, and I'm going to transition into the big announcement that, and that's the speculation that because of the success of the Marvel Connected Universe via Disney, which they're going to do again with Star Wars and anything else that Disney gets to turn on.
And very big announcement at Comic-Con.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Shut up. We'll get to the Marvel thing in just a second, but
I like talking over you, Mark.
I'm going to mute you. That's what I'm going to do. Because of the success of the Avengers and all of that, DC is now rushing to play catch-up, and they've thrown out the Justice League movie, and instead we get Batman versus Superman. So what was your reaction to that? And feel free to sort of go off the beaten path here, talk, add in some of the things that your experiences there at Comic-Con. But when they revealed the insignia of the Superman sign over the bat, what was your feeling? What was your thoughts?
I'm on board with it. I'm willing to see what they do with it, even though I had a couple problems with Man of Steel. I think they should have someone like Jonathan Nolan on there to kind of correct, the mistakes and errors that David Goyer tends to make. I think Goyer is a decent writer, but he's also a very flawed writer. So
you mean Chris Nolan?
Huh?
Chris Nolan? Are you talking about Chris Nolan?
No, I'm talking about Jonathan Nolan, Chris Nolan's brother, who co-wrote The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, and also I think he's worked on all of Chris Nolan's other non-Batman movies.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with this.
But here's my whole thing. We've known what Marvel was up to for a long time. Now, when DC, they kind of realigned themselves and, okay, we're going to be DC Entertainment under Warner Brothers. Okay, you're going to make Green Lantern. Okay, so you have the perfect opportunity. Are you going to start your own film universe now? No, we're going to do it differently. We're not going to do it like Marvel. And to me, that was a huge mistake. They tried to do their own Justice League movie during the writer's strike period with a bunch of no-name ridiculous actors. They cast a first-time model as Wonder Woman, a 22-year-old Armie Hammer as Batman, Jay Baruchel as Maxwell Lord, Common as Green Lantern John Stewart. It would have been a disaster, basically. The project got killed during the whole writer's strike. So now because of Avengers, they cannot ignore this anymore. So they're gonna try and rip off Marvel's model now, and try and do it their way. So we'll see. I kind of blame Diane Nelson and Jeff Johns, the bigwigs at DC Entertainment. Jeff Johns, you can probably go back and see my questions at the Green Lantern panel where I asked him are we going to start seeing a connected DC film universe, and Jeff Johns was too spineless to say no, we're not doing that way. And it wasn't until Avengers came out and kicked everyone's ass that they had to finally just stop pussyfooting around and start basically copying Marvel's model. So whatever. Marvel announced Avengers Age of Ultron.
But no Hank Pym.
I know everyone had this expectation for Thanos. We know Thanos is in Guardians of the Galaxy to some capacity. That was shown. Captain America 2 was shown. So there's that as well.
What did you think about the... I'm okay with them doing the Age of Ultron. What I'm a little confused by, and we'll see how they decide to pull it off, is they're not, at least as near as I can tell, they're not including Ant-Man in that particular Avengers movie. He's getting his own movie post-Avengers 2, which leads me to... It's very curious to me. Ultron is one of the Avengers' signature villains, so he's a great villain to have for this movie if they're not going straight to Thanos. He's an iconic villain. He's a computer. He's a computer that wants to sort of purify the Earth by getting rid of humanity. But he also kind of what's also funny and appealing about Ultron is that he wants a robot girlfriend. He wants Jocasta, which is kind of the robot equivalent of Janet Van Dyne. Kind of like Ultron is the robot equivalent of Hank Pym. Now, there have been alternate versions where Tony Stark was the one that created Ultron. And because of the little clip they showed of the Ultron head destroying the Iron Man mask, now we have this expectation, okay, so is Tony Stark going to be the one to create Ultron in this movie? Which we don't know. We don't really know what direction they're going. But I am concerned, I will say I am concerned that
they're doing an Ant-Man movie, and you have Ultron, who is sort of really the most defining part of Hank Pym's legacy, that he created Ultron. He's essentially Ultron's father, and he's not going to be a part of it. He's not going to be in the Avengers 2 to kind of help introduce Ultron. And then how are we going to do the Ant-Man movie and not have Ultron involved at all?
Oh, who knows?
I'm a little concerned how they're going to go about all this. How do they expect to do an Ant-Man movie without talking about Ant-Man's really signature villain? Now, there's also the Scott Lang character. Edgar Wright talked about using Scott Lang. His favorite Ant-Man story was To Steal an Ant-Man, which was the origin story of Scott Lang, who was the second Ant-Man after Hank Pym. Hank Pym allowed Scott Lang to become Ant-Man for a time, but as of now, it sounds like they're going to Hank Pym again. So I have no idea what they're doing.
Just a little bit that you're saying, it sounds like they're going to have. I mean, if they left off Iron Man, I'm just saying a shot in the dark here, but they left off Iron Man 3 where he cures himself of the shrapnel going into his chest, and he's going to give up the Iron Man armor. It would sound like, he's still going to be Tony Stark, and Tony Stark invents stuff. I would hazard a guess that they're going to have Tony Stark create Ultron. Ultron will then go on a rampage, and he will be forced to adopt the Iron Man armor once again to go stop this thing along with the rest of the Avengers, because he is not powerful enough to do it on his own.
That kind of goes against the whole "I'm not creating weapons anymore" thing. I don't know.
Who knows why he invented it? I mean, I'm not there in the script room, but
I think it would have.
If they decide to go that route,
it would have to be like an old project. It would have to be an old project that gets unearthed by some jerkwad. That kind of, so it's kind of like something he had in the pipeline but kind of let go of a long time ago.
Or not. I mean, look, as long the thing that's important with these movies is they have to give these characters, good motivations for doing things, compelling motivations for doing them, and I'll go along for the ride. We'll see what happens.
I don't know. Again, you see, the thing is, Ultron was always Hank Pym's creation. He was Hank Pym's demon.
Yes, and what have we learned from this podcast? It doesn't matter.
I know, but you see, that's kind of what I love about those stories. That Hank Pym is never really able to truly forgive himself for this sin of Ultron. He can never.
Maybe he can invent the Infinity Gauntlet.
He's never, and the thing is, since
hang
Ultron's
on.
an artificial.
Before you go on with this, have you heard about the rumor? Hang on. Have you heard about the rumors that Vin Diesel is going to be Vision?
I mean, they're rumors. We don't know who he's playing, or if the deal's even planning out. He could be Doctor Strange for all we know.
I hope Vin Diesel is Vision, and then they get Gina Carano as the Scarlet Witch, and they drive around in cars.
Like,
fast
everyone
cars.
online is saying, like, Benicio del Toro playing the Collector in Guardians of the Galaxy is just a smokescreen. He's actually playing Thanos, like they're doing, like they called Benedict Cumberbatch John Harrison when he was really Con Noonan Singh.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes left. Just give me your top 10 things observations, thoughts, of things you did at Comic-Con. Anything you want to tell the audience?
The Xbox, number one was the Xbox party. Xbox always, throws a good party at Comic-Con. It's the most fun and easygoing. I got to meet some UFC fighters there. That was the most fun I had at Comic-Con. Number two, some exclusives and toys I got just because I'm into, getting exclusive merchandise and stuff like that. I won't go into a lot of great detail about that just because that would probably bore some of you guys. But there was a lot of cool merchandise to pick up there, specifically Power Rangers. The Power Rangers Media Suite was probably number three. I got to meet and talk with, the new Power Rangers cast, and one of the originals, Jason David Frank, played the original Green Ranger, White Ranger, and was in many other iterations of the shows, and he's actually coming back for a big crossover story they're doing for the new season. So that was a lot of fun. The Marvel panels and press conferences were probably my most favorite panels to go to. The Marvel animation panel was great because I don't know if you've ever heard of Squadron Supreme, Mark, but basically, there was a time where in Marvel lore they created sort of like the doppelgangers of the Justice League and DC characters, and they kind of got involved with like the Avengers. They did a story with Hyperion, which is Marvel's version of Superman, in Avengers Assemble, the animated series. We got to see that at Comic-Con, so that was really cool. I got to play Killer Instinct on the Xbox. That was awesome. Now, here's just one more thing. Just the lines in the crowds at Comic-Con are out of control. They have no more room at the convention center. They're scheduling extra events and panels off-site. They need to do something because the convention, it's gotten out of control. I understand why they have like Mad Men and Breaking Bad there, but those should not be there. Don't bring FX comedies. Don't bring AMC dramas. Keep it genre, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books, maybe a little bit of horror, but get rid of AMC dramas. Don't show that crap there. Not crap, but you know what I mean. We need to get back to the genre comics. Stop bringing AMC FX stuff. It does not belong at Comic-Con. It's got to go.
Anything Star Wars related?
Nothing Star Wars really, because they just had Celebration Europe, so they're saving all that. They saved a lot of stuff for Celebration Europe, which we actually have been covering on the site a little bit. And plus, convention season is far from over, Mark. We have D23 coming up in a couple weeks, and I'll be there at that as well.
Okay. So that's the end of this podcast. We will be back just after August 23rd for the final movie in this series for now. It will be The World's End, which is the latest Simon Pegg movie. You know him from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. So there's another in that series of comedies. So we're gonna cover that one, and then we're gonna take a break from this until Thor and the Hobbit come out. That's the plan right now. Jeff, real quick, your plugs.
Okay, so we have MMA's 3Rs, UFC on Fox, exclusive interview with Phil Davis going up soon. Also Mike Brown, who's going to be fighting at UFC on Fox Sports 1. Of course, Phil Davis fights Lyoto Machida in the co-main event of UFC 163 this weekend. We'll be having, looks like we'll probably have a podcast review of that with the 411 Ground and Pound radio show. I'm working on a few Comic-Con pieces, and specifically, the video games and the Power Ranger interviews. Just bear with me. It has been crazy. I have not had like a moment to spare, and I have to go to a wedding this weekend. So I don't know how all these things are happening, but going to my cousin's wedding next weekend. Congratulations to my cousin Nathan and his bride Angela.
Okay, tomorrow night, the Long Road to Ruin, we're going to tackle the first two Mission Impossible movies. And then a week from tomorrow, we will Metal Hammer of Doom. We're doing Children of Bodom. Right now on the site, you can go ahead and check out the latest 401 Ground and Pound show where we reviewed UFC on Fox 8 and we previewed UFC 163 Korean Zombie versus Jose Aldo. Check me out.
And just real quick, Mark, I love Mission Impossible too. I love seeing it in the theaters. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I know there were issues during filming, but I love that movie. I got to be honest.
Yeah, I remember I saw the first one in the theater. I don't think I saw the second one, probably because I hated the Metallica song at the time. And then I fell asleep on the third one that I saw in the drive-in. So this has been an experience.
The third one is, I think, the one I like the least. The one like J.J.
And I haven't seen Ghost Protocol yet. So part of the reason why we're doing this is it gave me a chance to actually watch these movies. But I'll tell you what, spoiler alert for tomorrow night's podcast, I actually preferred Mission Impossible 2 to the first Mission Impossible. But you'll get to hear more about that tomorrow night. Again, doing Children of Bodom's Halo of Blood a week from tomorrow. currently on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. You have the entire summer of Jeff and I yelling and screaming at one another about movies, Pacific Rim, Iron Man 3, Man of Steel. You can check all of that out, plus any of the previous Long Road to Ruin or Metal Hammer of Doom podcasts. And finally, Robert Winfrey's series, the Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, is also up. Go ahead and check that out. So, for Jeff Harris, this has been the 401 Summer Blockbuster series. We've got one more left at World's End. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Be well, be safe, and behave.